Good morning, Georgianna. I'm super excited about the Take 5 that we have for you today. Really, it's the inspiration of Nick O'Brien, our worship pastor, who mentioned challenging the congregation a couple weeks back about reading the Sermon on the Mount all the way through. And then I began to think, what a perfect way for us to spend some time studying God's Word is to do a deep dive into the Sermon on the Mount. And so we're going to jump in right away and to look at this. So we need to understand that this is happening in the northern Galilee part of Israel. Jesus is near Capernaum, just outside that ancient city. And then this is the passage that we get that comes from chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. It says, "Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them." Now, what we know throughout church history is that it wasn't just the disciples. Crowds begin to gather around as well. Coming from the outside parts of Galilee and Capernaum, they had been following him, they had been seeing him. And so when he sits down to teach, there's our crowd. So this is probably a couple of hundred people. Some of us have been to Israel, have had the good fortune of actually seeing what is known as the Mount of Beatitudes, this sloping hillside where in all likelihood Jesus taught his first sermon. Now, let me just share with you these Beatitudes. He said in verse 3, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Here's what I want to tell you, church. If Jesus was in seminary and his homiletics professor had heard this beginning of this very first sermon, he'd have probably given him a D+. So here's the reason behind that is there is no intro. There is no moment of lightheartedness. He doesn't tell a joke. He doesn't warm up the crowd. He just jumps right into what would have been in that day some of the most radical and countercultural words that you can ever begin to imagine. Literally, no warm-up act. Just sits down and he begins to teach. He is not self-selling the gospel. His very first sermon starts with a gut punch about what it looks like to be blessed. So we know that in the kingdom of God, that blessed is the position we want to find ourselves in. So when it means that we are blessed, so it's this combination of contentment and then this concept of anticipation. So the true word for this from the Hebrew is asher. We do not have a really good translation other than the word blessed. And think about how we misuse the word blessed. We confuse it with the word lucky all the time in the church. But blessed is a state of being where our inner contentment is reflected in our outward anticipation of what God's going to do through us. And so we get these Beatitudes, this opening part, and for the next, 7-8 weeks, we're going to unpack them one at a time. But part of what I want to say to you is that when Jesus says these things, there would have been shock on the faces of the hearers, on the disciples and anybody who had gathered that day. They could not have believed in any world they lived in where Jesus would have said something like, "Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who are meek." They would have had no concept for that. So churches, we think about these radical statements. I want to challenge us as we sit in this sermon to think about what the things we share with other people, whether they're radical or whether they're just go along to get along kind of statements. Do we talk about the love of God in a way that somebody is like blown away? That you would love God so much that you might make a statement of compassion or empathy that's beyond what the world drops on us all the time. So church, I'm excited about us being in this Sermon on the Mount. I'm really grateful to Nick for his inspiration of that. We are excited about a new year and our vision word, which for the year will be the word unity. Never have we lived in a season of greater discord and disunity than the world we're living in right now. So I'm really excited, church, about what God has for us in the future. Thank you for helping us finish 2021 in a powerful way, and we are looking forward to even more good things that come from God as we work alongside Him for the advancement of His kingdom and the repelling of darkness. I love you so much. Can't wait for us to do this deep dive into the Sermon on the Mount. Have a great week. Love you, church.